Yo, man, you killed 6 people? Did you kill 6 people, sir?
Nuh-uh.
Huh?
13. They just
You killed 13?
13 people.
Okay. Why'd you do it?
7. Oh my.
Heartbreak in Clay County tonight. 6 people murdered, 3 different crime scenes. A family executed in cold blood by one of their own. This is the 3rd mass shooting in Clay County since 2023 and one of Mississippi's deadliest mass shootings in recent history. This is the man investigators say is responsible for the violence and the bloodshed, 24-year-old Daricka Moore. He's behind bars tonight, accused of murdering 6 people. 4 of Moore's victims were his own family. One of the victims was a 7-year-old girl. Moore will go before a judge in Clay County Monday. He is charged with first-degree murder, but we expect that charge to be upgraded to capital murder within the next 48 hours.
There's a certain kind of violence that doesn't announce itself with years of warning signs. It doesn't build slowly. It doesn't follow the patterns we've been trained to recognize. On January 9th, 2026, 6 people were killed in rural Mississippi over the course of 4.5 hours. The person responsible had no criminal history, no documented threats, no prior contact with law enforcement that would have flagged him as dangerous. This isn't a case about missed red flags or ignored warnings. It's about something far more unsettling, the possibility that sometimes there's nothing to miss. That someone can move through life appearing entirely unremarkable and then commit acts so incomprehensible that even seasoned investigators struggle to make sense of them. What happened in Clay County that night challenges our assumptions about violence, how we predict it, how we prevent it, and whether we can always see it coming. The victims included family members, a child, and 2 brothers who had no apparent connection to the accused beyond living in the same rural community. The brutality was extreme. The targeting appeared deliberate, and yet no clear motive has emerged. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Dark Truth Files for more true crime cases.
Why'd you do it?
7.
This case forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality, that our systems for identifying dangerous individuals rely on patterns, and patterns require history. So what happens when there is none? The first 3 victims were family members killed at a mobile home on David Hill Road near Cedar Bluff, Mississippi. Glenn Moore was 67 years old. He was the father of the accused. Beyond this familial connection, little public information has been released about his life, occupation, or personal history. What is known is that he lived in the rural residence where the violence began. Willie Eade Gines was 55. He was Glenn's brother-in-law and the uncle of the accused. Like Glenn, his daily life and background remain largely out of public view, typical for individuals in small, rural communities where privacy is often maintained even after tragedy. Quentin Moore was 33. He was the brother of the accused. He owned a Ford F-150 truck, which became relevant to the sequence of events that followed. No information about his employment, relationships, or personal circumstances has been made public. The 4th victim was a 7-year-old girl. Authorities described her as a second cousin of the accused. She lived with her mother and at least one younger sibling on Blake Road. Reports indicate she was killed in her own home, in front of witnesses. Her identity has been protected due to her age, and details about her life have understandably been withheld out of respect for her family. The 5th and 6th victims were Barry Bradley and Samuel Bradley, 2 brothers killed at a residence on Siloam Griffith Road. Barry Bradley was a reverend who led a local apostolic church. Some members of the Moore family reportedly attended services there, though the nature and frequency of this connection isn't fully documented. His role in the community was public-facing, but personal details about his life outside ministry have not been widely reported. Samuel Bradley's background has received even less coverage. His relationship to Bari, biological brothers, is confirmed, but details about his age, occupation, or personal life remain unknown. What stands out across all 6 victims is how little warning anyone had. These were not individuals involved in high-risk lifestyles. They were not entangled in public disputes or dangerous situations. They were relatives, neighbors, members of a small community. Their deaths appeared to come without precedent. Daricka Moore was 24 years old at the time of the shootings. He lived in Clay County, a rural area near West Point and Cedar Bluff. His connection to the victims was familial and geographical. He knew them because they were relatives or members of the same tight-knit community. According to Sheriff Eddie Scott, Moore had no prior criminal record. He was not on law enforcement's radar in any capacity before that night. This wasn't someone who had been arrested previously, had a history of domestic violence complaints, or had generated concern among neighbors or family members that rose to the level of police involvement. The church connection is worth noting. Bari Bradley's apostolic church was attended by some Moore family members, which suggests at least a peripheral religious or social connection. However, there's no indication that Moore himself was an active member, or that any conflict existed between him and the Bradley brothers prior to the shootings. The relationship between Moore and the 7-year-old victim is more difficult to assess. She was his second cousin, meaning they were separated by 1 generation in the family tree. Whether they had regular contact, whether he had ever shown inappropriate behavior toward her or other children in the family, remains unanswered. The alleged sexual assault attempt that night suggests something deeply disturbed, but there's no public record of prior allegations or warnings. What information did authorities already have? The answer appears to be nothing. No restraining orders, no calls to the residents, no reports from family members expressing fear or concern. This absence of documented warning signs is itself significant. It means the systems designed to flag dangerous individuals, police reports, court filings, social services interventions, had nothing to work with. This raises a troubling question. Can someone live for 24 years without generating any official red flags, and then commit violence this extreme? Or were there warning signs that existed only within the family, never formalized, never reported? In small, rural communities, informal family dynamics often remain private. Disputes are handled internally. Concerns about a relative's behavior might be shared among family members but never escalate to law enforcement. It's possible that people close to Moore noticed something, instability, anger, troubling comments, but chose not to involve authorities. It's also possible there was genuinely nothing to notice. We don't know which scenario is true. There was no escalation in the traditional sense, no progression from minor offenses to serious crimes, no documented interactions with police, courts, or social services that would have created a paper trail. This absence is important to understand clearly. The systems we rely on to prevent violence, restraining orders, mental health interventions, probation monitoring, domestic violence programs, had no opportunity to function here because Moore had never entered those systems. He wasn't someone who had been arrested and released. He wasn't someone who had been flagged by a mental health professional and slipped through the cracks. He wasn't someone who had threatened violence and been ignored. There was no institutional failure in the conventional sense because there was no institutional contact. What we're left with is a gap that exists outside the reach of prevention systems. If someone has never committed a crime, never been reported for threatening behavior, never sought or been referred for mental health treatment, there's no legal or procedural mechanism to intervene. Our framework for identifying dangerous individuals is reactive, not predictive. This doesn't mean nothing could have been done. It means we lack information about whether anything should have been done. Were there private conversations among family members about Moore's mental state? Did anyone express concern about his behavior in the weeks or months before the shootings? Did he exhibit signs of psychological distress that were visible to those around him, but never formalized into a report? These questions remain unanswered because the investigation has focused primarily on the crimes themselves, not on the months or years leading up to them. Authorities have not publicly disclosed whether they are interviewing family members, friends, or community members about Moore's behavior prior to that night. What we do know is that by early evening on January 9th, 2026, no one in law enforcement was looking for Daricka Moore. He was not a suspect in any ongoing investigation. He was not a person of interest in any previous incident. When the first call came in shortly before 7 p.m., it marked the moment Moore appeared on law enforcement's radar for the first time. The manhunt that followed was reactive, not preventive. It was a response to crimes already committed, not an intervention to stop crimes before they happened. We don't know how Moore spent the hours or days immediately before the shootings. No public reporting has addressed his movements, state of mind, or interactions with others in the period leading up to that evening. Moore allegedly arrived at the mobile home on David Hill Road where his father, uncle, and brother were present. The method of killing, gunshot wounds to the head, described by some sources as execution style, suggests planning rather than spontaneous rage. These were not chaotic, frenzied attacks. They were deliberate. After the killings, Moore allegedly took Quentin's Ford F-150 truck. This decision indicates some level of forethought. He needed transportation to reach the next location, and taking his deceased brother's vehicle provided that. The second location was a home on Blake Road. Moore allegedly forced entry. Inside were the 7-year-old girl, her mother, and at least one younger child. What happened next is among the most disturbing elements of the case. Moore allegedly attempted to sexually assault the child while armed. He then shot her in the head. At some point during this attack, he placed a gun to the head of another young child. Whether the gun misfired or whether Moore chose not to pull the trigger remains unclear. The presence of witnesses, particularly the child's mother, adds another layer of incomprehensibility. Moore did not attempt to eliminate witnesses. He did not kill the mother or the other child, despite their ability to identify him. This suggests either that he didn't care about being caught, or that his focus was so narrowly fixed on specific targets that he disregarded the obvious consequences. From Blake Road, Moore drove the stolen truck to Siloam Griffith Road. He concealed the vehicle behind a residence connected to the Apostolic Church where Barry Bradley served as pastor. Both Barry and Samuel Bradley were inside. Both were shot in the head. By this point, roughly 4 hours had passed since the first murders. Law enforcement had been alerted. A manhunt involving multiple agencies was underway. Moore left the Bradley residence and took another vehicle, presumably stolen from that location, and continued driving. It's unclear where he intended to go, or whether he had additional targets in mind. The crime scene evidence speaks to extreme violence executed with precision. At David Hill Road, 3 men were found dead from gunshot wounds to the head. The use of the term execution style by investigators suggests close-range shootings, likely while the victims were restrained, incapacitated, or unaware. There's no indication of a struggle or defensive wounds that would suggest prolonged confrontation. Moore allegedly killed his father, uncle, and brother in rapid succession. At Blake Road, the scene was more chaotic. Forced entry indicates Moore broke into the home rather than being let inside. The alleged sexual assault attempt, described legally as sexual battery while armed, occurred before the shooting. The 7-year-old was killed in the presence of her mother and at least one sibling. The fact that Moore placed a gun to another child's head but did not fire raises questions about whether he was interrupted, whether the weapon malfunctioned, or whether he made a deliberate choice not to kill that child. Sheriff Eddie Scott described this aspect of the crime as incomprehensible, stating publicly that he could not fathom any motive for killing a 7-year-old. This statement reflects not just moral revulsion but investigative confusion. Even in cases involving extreme violence, there is usually some internal logic to the perpetrator's actions. Here, that logic remains obscure. At Siloam Griffith Road, Barry and Samuel Bradley were found dead, also from gunshot wounds to the head. The positioning of their bodies and the circumstances of their deaths have not been detailed publicly, but the consistency of method, headshots, suggests Moore was operating with a clear approach rather than improvising. One notable aspect of the crime: Moore did not attempt to conceal his identity. He used his brother's truck, which was easily traceable. He left witnesses alive at Blake Road who could identify him. He took another vehicle from the Bradley residence that would also link him to the scene. This suggests either that he was not concerned with evading capture, or that he was operating in a psychological state where consequences were irrelevant. The timeline indicates the shootings occurred over approximately 4.5 hours. This was not a brief, explosive outburst. It was sustained, methodical, and involved travel between locations. Moore had time to stop, time to reconsider, time to recognize what he was doing. He continued anyway. Multiple agencies responded, including the Clay County Sheriff's Office, Mississippi Highway Patrol, U.S. Marshals Service, and neighboring jurisdictions. A massive manhunt was launched across rural Clay County. Roadblocks were established at key intersections. Officers began tracking Moore's movements by identifying the stolen vehicles and piecing together the sequence of crime scenes. Approximately 4.5 hours after the first shooting, Moore was apprehended at a roadblock near the intersection of Pine Grove Road and Joe Myers Road. He was driving a vehicle taken from the Siloam Griffith Road location. The arrest was made without incident. No additional individuals were injured during the manhunt. Moore was transported to the Clay County Jail in West Point, where he was booked at approximately 3:25 a.m. on January 10th. Initial charges filed were first-degree murder. However, Clay County District Attorney Scott Collum announced publicly that charges would be upgraded to capital murder, making Moore ineligible for bail. Capital murder in Mississippi applies when specific aggravating factors are present: murder of multiple people, murder during the commission of another felony such as sexual battery, or murder of a child under specific circumstances. Moore's case met multiple criteria. Collum stated that his office intended to pursue the death penalty, describing the case as about as bad as it gets, and emphasizing the brutality of the crimes, the targeting of family members, and the killing of a child. Moore's first court appearance was scheduled for Monday, January 13th. At this preliminary hearing, formal charges would be read, and Moore would have the opportunity to enter a plea. Given the severity of the charges and the strength of the evidence, including witness testimony, forensic evidence from 3 crime scenes, and Moore's apprehension in a stolen vehicle, a guilty plea seemed unlikely. Capital murder cases typically proceed to trial unless a plea agreement is negotiated, which would require the defendant to plead guilty in exchange for a life sentence rather than execution. As of mid-January 2026, the case remained in its early stages. Autopsies were being conducted by the Mississippi Crime Lab. Evidence was being processed. Investigators were working to establish motive, though none had been publicly identified. The legal process would take months, potentially years, to resolve. This case exposes a fundamental limitation in how we approach violence prevention. Our systems are designed to respond to patterns, but Moore had no pattern. Most mass shootings, family annihilations, and targeted rampages involve perpetrators with documented histories, prior arrests, restraining orders, reports to police, threats made publicly or privately, mental health crises, substance abuse, employment terminations, relationship breakdowns. These create opportunities for intervention, imperfect opportunities, often missed, but opportunities nonetheless. Moore had none of this. He was 24 years old with no criminal record. He had not been flagged by any institution. If he exhibited warning signs, they existed only in private spaces, within family, among friends, in his own mind. This raises a procedural question. What should law enforcement or social services have done differently? The honest answer is that, based on available information, there's nothing they could have done. You cannot intervene on someone who has never come to your attention. But that doesn't mean nothing was knowable. It means the information existed outside official systems. In small, rural communities like Clay County, family dynamics often remain private. People handle problems internally. If a relative is struggling with mental health issues, the family addresses it privately rather than involving authorities or medical professionals. If someone is behaving erratically, neighbors might talk among themselves but not file reports. This creates blind spots. The systems designed to prevent violence, police, courts, mental health services, only see what is reported to them. If a family chooses not to report concerning behavior, those systems cannot act. It's possible that people close to Moore notice something. Mood changes, withdrawal, anger, troubling statements. It's also possible they didn't, or that they noticed but didn't interpret it as dangerous. The alleged sexual assault attempt against the 7-year-old child is particularly significant. This suggests a level of depravity that typically doesn't emerge suddenly. Sexual violence against children often follows a progression: grooming behavior, boundary violations, prior incidents. Was this Moore's first offense, or had there been earlier warning signs that were never reported? We don't know because investigators have not publicly addressed this. The focus has been on prosecuting the crimes that occurred, not on reconstructing Moore's psychological history. Another gap: the relationship between Moore and the Bradley brothers. What was the connection? Why were they targeted? The church attendance link is thin. Some Moore family members attended Barry Bradley's services, but there's no evidence Moore himself was involved or that any conflict existed. The lack of clear motive is itself revealing. It suggests either that Moore's reasoning was entirely internal and irrational, or that critical information about his relationships and state of mind remains undisclosed. What this case demonstrates is that even when institutions function properly, they cannot prevent violence that originates outside their view. 6 people were killed in rural Mississippi over the course of 4.5 hours. 3 were family members of the accused. 1 was a 7-year-old child. 2 were brothers with a tangential connection to the family. Daricka Moore had no criminal history, no documented threats, no prior warnings that would have alerted law enforcement to any danger. When he was arrested, it marked the first time his name appeared in any official record. This case is a reminder that not all violence is preventable through institutional means. Some acts occur without warning signs visible to anyone outside the perpetrator's immediate circle. Some occur without warning signs at all. What we can ask is whether more could have been learned, whether family members, neighbors, or community members held information that might have mattered, whether there were private concerns that never became public reports. Those questions remain unanswered. The investigation continues. The legal process is just beginning. Do you think this case could have been prevented? Share your thoughts in the comments.